5 specific actions, 5 specific parts of his body. You're trying.
Those are limbs. Those aren't.
Yeah, limbs. I know those are limbs, but it's not the action. It's the machshava behind it. It's much more than.
Those aren't efforts. The question is, does the effort stem from a bad will? Does it stem from a yetzer hara, or does it stem from
now I'm going to use
something
my legs for good things. It doesn't mean it's the same psychic energy. That's a difficult concept to understand.
It's the effort that you extend.
I mean,
Does it
we
come
might
from the
need
yetzer
to
hara?
come to sublimation.
So you say that you do Averu with your legs. Your legs
That's what he
become
means. It
evil
means
vessels.
sublimation.
Okay.
He's saying no.
Okay, then I would say that we could have a fourth level, a fourth madrega, which is to take it all the way, where that's already ishbitz, where we say that, let's just say that God just did the whole thing, which maybe you could only do, the pashtus, you could only do that. You're only allowed to say that after the whole story came to an end. But after the whole story came to an end, and then the person already did tshuva, then we can say the whole thing was part of the master plan. It's noid alila, and God wanted it to be this way, and God wanted you to sin, and God made you sin in order that you should come in order that you should come to do this tshuva and so on. Then at the end it becomes a totally redemptive story, and the whole thing becomes only the will of God, and when you look back on the whole thing, the evil seems to be totally erased. The evil seems to have been only a momentary illusion, but if you look back on the whole thing, it was all just the divine plan, all just the will of God. There was never really any rebellion. It was God's will that this should be done, and so on. So I think that's taking it all the way. Let's take it all the way to see the actual sinning itself as part of a divine master plan. After the fact, it always had to be that way. That's the way it had to be. God wanted it that way. The sin is an act of God. The fact that tshuva came out of it shows that the sin is an act of God, and it's all part of the spiritual growth, the process of spiritual growth of the individual and Klal Yisrael, which was willed by God, and that's the way it is. It's all good. It was all good. It is all good. It will only be all good all the time. That's it.
Now we have to interpret it as still this reality.
Now okay. Just wanted to add. Now that we arrived in Ishbitz, we come to a really radical, relatively radical aspect of Chassidic antinomianism, which is the doctrine of the holy sin, which is not the holy sin after the fact, but the holy sin before the fact, during the fact, and so on. The idea being that someone who is on a sufficiently developed spiritual level, this is dangerous, do not try this at home. Someone is on a sufficiently developed level, a holy man, a saint. In some books it says that a person can only get into this sort of thing, sinning for the sake of God, if he is someone who has erased all his own personal desires, all the desires for personal gain, benefit, pleasure, and only thinks of God's will all the time, if a desire comes to him. And it is a desire for sin. And he fights against the desire. And he cannot defeat the desire, since he is such a holy man, and he cleaves unto God all the time, and he has annulled his own personal desires. He is entitled to believe that everything that comes into his mind, everything that comes into his heart is from God, including this desire to sin. And he can go, in the first place, flat out go and sin. And he ought to do that.
Like
I
do
it all the time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
That's kind of like the philosophy of Kama Sutra, which is that we have these dark elements, these things that society or morality would shun and forbid, but if you can do it with sufficient and practiced focus and devotion, you can elevate those parts of your psyche.
I don't know.
You could give it Kama Sutra classes. I don't know the actual.
Look, I don't know. I don't know anything about Kama Sutra, and I can't make quick and easy comparisons. I can't make quick and easy comparisons.
Oh, forget it then.
But the idea being that The idea being that if someone is so worked out spiritually and he can consider himself a pure vessel for the divine light, he knows that he doesn't have any impure thoughts and he always wants only to do the will of God. And this thing came into his mind. It came into his mind that he should do X, which is a sin, and he fights to overcome it and he can't overcome it, and that is a sign that it is in fact the will of God that he should go ahead and commit that sin. It is in fact the will of God that you go ahead and commit that sin, because that will bring about great tikkunim. That will bring about great repairs, transformations in all the worlds, higher and lower. Now, this is the doctrine that is put forth in Ishbitz Sfarim, quite radical, quite radical. It was attacked even in Chassidic circles, and you know that they say that the Tzanzer Rebbe said that you need to burn the book. So then there's a story that there was a town where it was a small town, and most of the people were Tzanzer Chassidim. There was one Ishbitz Chassidim. So, no, fakert. Most people were Ishbitz Chassidim, and there was one Tzanzer Chassidim. So the big wilde Ishbitzer shtickle, the famous shtickle is Parshas Pinchas, where even though it says in the Torah that Zimri is the bad guy and Pinchas is the good guy, because Zimri was lying with the Gentile woman, and Pinchas slaughtered them out of zeal for the Lord. But the Ishbitzer says, really, Pinchas not he didn't know what was going on, and what they were doing was great, and God really wanted them to do it, and it was fixing. So that's what he says. It has some antecedents in Kisvei Arizal, I mean, but that's what the Ishbitzer says. So that's a Mishnah of Parshas Pinchas here. That's just one example. There are many such things. For some reason, that became the most famous one. Maybe because it seems to be fakert from what it says in the Pasuk. You can't laugh at these things. It's worked out. We need to know a lot more about these things. Perhaps I shouldn't even bring it up because I'm indulging in a certain amount of vulgarity. The thing is worked out. But I can't go through the whole thing right here. And I don't know enough to go through the whole thing. But the thing is worked out. But so they say that. So it came Parshas Pinchas, and in the town they found the Ma'ashloich and Biskis. They found somebody shoved it under the toilet. So they knew what address to go to, so they went to this Tzanzer guy and they said, what's the story? Parshas Pinchas, he said, listen, I had a moirdi ketava to put it in. I fought it and I couldn't go.
So that when that person does it out of that intention, is he liable for his actions?
No, look, the thing is like this. The thing is that in the earthly court,
he didn't have a choice. He says that the type is so strong that he has to be impossible for the captain.
That's what it says. Yeah, you're right. But it depends what you mean. And when you say liable for my friend here is right that